Right. So just a few short updates in terms of what's happening in the CSP communication service provider space slash the AI slash cloud. And particularly, of course, without too much of do, I can tell you for sure that the one factor that's actually playing a big role in shaking up everything, making all the noises, the right noises, is Nvidia again in this week. And particularly important is the fact that the first H100s have actually arrived on shore, and no prizes for guessing who the winner is. This is definitely India's most talked about data center at the point, which is Yotta data center. And this picture is right for the actual post unpackaging picture of the NVIDIA chipsets for the first time in the country. So these are 4,000 chipsets have actually arrived according to what I just read on Bloomberg. And this is the first consignment of the 16,384 odd chipsets that are being ordered at a cost of between $30 to $40,000 a piece for the order data center, which is housed in Mumbai. Now, this, as you know, is the data center that belongs to the that has been incubated by the Hiranandani, the large real estate group in the country. And not surprisingly, most of these have been along Mumbai, Chennai, and as the data center has to be very close to the landing point of the submarine fiber optic cable. So that is part of the reason it's grown in this fashion. And what you see here is the NVIDIA powered Shakti Cloud, which is their offering. Go to the website of Yotta, go to the Shakti Cloud uh, page, and you'll get all the details, including how the H100s will be charged on a per CPU basis. GPU as a service is now a reality in India, and this is something that's very, very important. And look at the total cost involved between now and end of the year. I think about 20,000 H100s will be actually active, powering up the data center, and then the rest of the orders will get shipped. So before 2025 end, I think it will have a cluster of about 32K odd, if I remember, 32,800 odd H100 alone in the Yotta data center. So this is just phase one, and it's probably going to be one of Asia's largest and most powerful AI-powered data centers at this point. But don't forget that the Adani Group, the Geo Group, Bharti Airtel, all of them, and the Tata Communications Group are all looking, and they're in various stages of planning. So India might actually become a very large data center market. If you know the stats, from what I remember correctly, I think we are currently at 1.5 gigawatts in terms of data center capacity, and we're looking to expand to about 5 gigawatts by 2027, 28, which is going to be a significant rise in the data center capacity and the deployment. So, one of the things I was thinking to be shared here, and let me move this over, is it's also a fact that the Indian government has made a strong commitment. In fact, in terms of the draft data bill that has actually been moved, now the data center as a sector is now considered as an infrastructure sector. And so all the SOPs in terms of the tax credits, the benefits, the additional funding, and the government push in terms of new investments, both domestic as well as foreign in the data center segment, is going to be hugely encouraged. And particularly with respect to the startup, to aid the startups that are going to require access to high-powered AI chipsets and the large, H100s and so on. The Modi government has actually proactively made a commitment to invest and make available 25,000, a cluster of 25,000 H100 slash GPUs to become available for the startups, which is, I think, a significant commitment in terms of showing the world as well as the startup entrepreneurs in India how important they are to the growing economy. So that's one more input to be shared here. I also wanted to go back to the one of the important slides I shared last time, and just let you know that the GPU powering and the demand for this whole thing is not just from a generative AI perspective. It is also a combined data consumption, which in India, I believe, has crossed about 23 GB per user per month, which is almost 1 GB per user per day. So it's very, very high already and is looking to grow at the continued rate of about 25% annualized per year per person. So we are talking, and we are not even fully 5G yet. I mean, only parts of the country are 5G. The 5G user base is not even more than 100 million. That number will start growing. The generative AI will start kicking in. Development. I think the entire demand for data is going to, become so big that this kind of investments in data centers is not going to be too much, and you can be sure that we'll probably still run out of space, of power, of capacity in terms of data centers to power and make sure that this kind of a demand is met. I want to move on and just let you know that there is, of course, this is something you already know in terms of actually moving from 3G slash 4G to 5G and increasing the 6G. The fundamental change in the core network as well as non-core is the level of virtualization, the level of cloudification, the level of containerization, and therefore how these functions are no longer just network function virtualization as we know it, but is now increasingly going to become cloud native, which means several of these functions which were otherwise sitting inside the data center are now becoming cloud based, which means again that from an in-house perspective, the CSP, the cellular service providers now really have to think how to continue to power these functions because they're transitioning out of what we otherwise thought was captive cellular service provider footprint. Now that is all moving out. Of course, it could move to own data centers and it could also move to other data centers based on contracts and so on and pricing. But the way I see it, most likely, I think we're going to have a situation where, um, it is akin to what happened in the tower space, right? So while the cellular service providers were, focusing on spectrum acquisition, customer acquisition, ARPU increment, ensuring end-to-end quality, meeting the performance indicator requirement, PI requirements from the regulators, and making sure compliance was happening and all of that. One of the pieces that became increasingly important was the entire tower piece. Right? The tower was going to suck in a lot of steel, wrought iron, all the infrastructure, the land. The fundamental business of towers, as such, was a very different capex plus opex intensive, unlike the actual service provider business. So, rightfully so, one of the nice things that happened in managed services mode, a lot of the towers became shared infrastructure. So, and that shared infrastructure itself became so large that the amount of investment it needed, the kind of capital that it consumed was going to be so high, and the business dynamics of that entire piece was, while very necessary and very essential to almost homegrown networks in India, it also became important that from a business perspective, it had to be perhaps bifurcated or split or spun off of the actual service provider business and spun into separate business units, which was the right thing to do. And today you have large corporations like Indus Towers, which is an independent company, is publicly listed. It's, I think, in the range of about 24,000 crores odd run rate annually. And of course, they have debt and so on, but they're an independent business. They can be valued independently. Their margins are separate. Their profitability is separate. And then, of course, companies like Airtel and Vodafone and others may have still some holding in it. So my view is that very similar things are going to happen in the data center side because it becomes strategically so important and financially so complex that it might actually make sense to spin that out. Which in a way, companies like Airtel have already done by Nextra is a separate company and and it maybe go public sometime. It will raise capital on its own. It will stand on its own. Similarly, I think the data center model appears like a very important captive infrastructure piece, which becomes so critical to the success of cellular service providers or communication providers in general. Also, don't forget, the cellular service provider particularly is kind of when I say cellular service provider, I mean communication service provider in general, but not necessarily the exclusive cloud service providers because I'm talking about the Geo, the Airtel kind of converged players who actually have a very vital business to look after. At the same time, there is elements of cloud service providers like Azure, like GCP, like AWS that are beginning to step into this territory, and there are so many layers of overlap, and there is a very critical play in terms of both competition and co-opetition, because you need to be careful, and that line is getting blurred more and more, not just from the traditional elements that are becoming increasingly containerized, or the elements of the core network that are becoming containerized, that are becoming um, cloud native, but it also is because of new factors like AI, new factors like generative AI, and the players that are coming in. For example, we never had an Nvidia enter into the RAN space till now, but that might become a possibility and that might become real because we're now beginning to see that uh, Nvidia is actually advertising, looking for RF engineers, looking for 5G, 6G, full stack end-to-end, experts that can come in and take a good understanding of why should RAN traffic not also go through the H100 or maybe the GPUs? And that makes sense because of the performance characteristics. And for example, today that layer one and layer two of the RAN space, which has predominantly been Marvel and Intel chips in the hardware that was built by Nokia and Ericsson, those are likely to get disrupted even further. uh, Whether you think that the O-RAN space is actually going to become as big a deal as it was or not, elements of that may actually become a reality very soon. They start moving away. So how are communication service providers going to look at this? Are they going to have a say? Is it going to become an area of influence, or will with the brute force of silicon coming from players like Nvidia change the game? And if stakeholders like cellular service providers don't wake up in time and understand really what's going on, uh, they may become also rats in a space of where you see brute silicon force coming in and disrupting existing markets. That's all for today. I just thought I would share some of these key observations and developments that happened in the last week. Much of this data is public domain. Please feel free to download or go there for additional research. If there's anything that you're doing and building in the startup area that is going to be much in this space or very much in this space, I'm happy to help and just get in touch and follow this YouTube channel for more information. Good day.